The skies were clear, or so it seemed, until NORAD, conceived to protect the US and Canada from Soviet bombers with state-of-the-art radars, satellites, and navigation systems, detected unidentified aircraft breaching the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone during an early morning in May 2024. Communication operators at NORAD HQ were puzzled by the sudden alarms and the beeping of the systems, detecting unidentified aircraft flying toward territorial airspace. As the seconds passed, the men in the comms room realized what was coming their way. Fully loaded with nuclear ordnance, a pair of Russian Tupolev Tu-95 Bear strategic bombers were closing in fast, and they were not alone. Escorting them were two Sukhoi Su-35 Flankers, supermaneuverable air superiority fighters, ready to defend their bombers at all costs. NORAD, without hesitation, swiftly dispatched a pair of fast and reliable F-16s to intercept them. A backup of other fighters and several tankers were ready to answer the call if things went sideways. As the F-16s made their way to the Russian aircraft, their orders echoed through the communications network. Engage the enemy if it breaches American airspace. The North American Aerospace Defense Command is a collaborative defense initiative between the United States and Canada tasked with protecting the airspace over North America. Created by both nations in 1958, it aimed to defend the continental United States against the threat of Soviet bombers during the tensions of the Cold War era. According to NORAD, their aerospace warning mandate includes, quote, the monitoring of man-made objects in space, and the detection, validation, and warning of attack against North America, whether by aircraft, missiles, or space vehicles, through mutual support arrangements with other commands. Aerospace control includes ensuring air sovereignty and air defense of the airspace of Canada and the United States. All NORAD operations are coordinated from Peterson Air Force Base, Colorado, where its commander oversees operations of other bases across Canada and the US. To accomplish its mission, NORAD uses, quote, a network of satellites, ground-based radar, airborne radar, and fighters to detect, intercept, and, if necessary, engage any air-breathing threat to North America. Since its creation, NORAD has proven highly effective in watching, warning, responding, and defending American and Canadian aerospace with diligence. On May 2, 2024, NORAD tracked Russian military aircraft operating within the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone. These operations, which often involve Russian Tu-95 Bear 8 strategic bombers escorted by Su-35 Flanker E fighters, are a regular part of NORAD's vigilance in monitoring airspace where identification is crucial for national security. The Air Defense Identification Zone, extending beyond sovereign airspace, is a buffer requiring the identification of all aircraft for security purposes. Interceptions, particularly of Russian aircraft, have become more frequent since the Russo-Ukrainian War began in February 2022, reflecting increased military alertness. The Soviet-era Tu-95 Bear H, a turboprop-powered bomber dating back to the 1950s, continues to serve in the Russian air fleet and is expected to remain operational until at least 2040. It's the only propeller-powered strategic bomber still in use, known for its distinctive swept-back wings and contra-rotating propellers. At its side, the Su-35 Flanker E, a derivative of the Su-27, serves as its escort, demonstrating Russia's blend of old and new in aerial operations. On February 14, 2023, NORAD had previously scrambled F-16 fighters to intercept a formation of Russian aircraft near Alaska. Supporting assets included F-35A Lightning IIs and E-3 Sentry AWACS and KC-135 Stratotanker refuelers, indicating the readiness to escalate if necessary. However, encounters typically de-escalate quickly, with Russian aircraft returning to their territory without incident. NORAD later stated, quote, this Russian activity in the North American ADIZ occurs regularly and is not seen as a threat, nor is the activity seen as provocative. Since 2007, when Russia resumed long-range aviation activities, NORAD has averaged about 6 to 7 intercepts per year, with the number varying annually. Russian aircraft have conducted long-range flights that enter the ADIZ for decades, and American aircraft have routinely been sent to intercept them. In September 2007, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced Russia would resume long-range flights of its strategic bombers, capable of striking down objectives deep inside the continental US with nuclear weapons. The Soviet-era practice of sending bombers in regular patrols was resumed instantly, with the deployment of over 14 bombers. When President Putin made this announcement, he noted, quote, Russia stopped this practice in 1992. Unfortunately, not everybody followed suit. This creates a strategic risk for Russia. We hope our partners show understanding towards the resumption of Russian air patrols. At the time of these comments, various analysts argued that such a decision was a grave mistake, as it violated a 1991 agreement that sought not to engage in long-range nuclear bomber flights. Since this announcement, NORAD intercepts of Russian bombers and fighters have become a recurring sight for the U.S. Air Force, with NORAD stating, quote, "Since Russia resumed out-of-area long-range aviation activity in 2007, NORAD has seen a yearly average of approximately 6 to 7 intercepts of Russian military aircraft in the ADIZ. These numbers have varied yearly from as high as 15 to as low as 0. More recently, in October 2022, NORAD was forced to dispatch 2 U.S. Air Force F-16s to Alaska to once again intercept the Russian bombers and send them back. Nevertheless, despite the lack of an immediate threat, the presence of these aircraft carried an undercurrent of tension, reminiscent of the Cold War standoffs between the two superpowers. As if following a script written during the decades of near misses and high-stakes adrenaline from the 1960s to the 1990s, the Russian bombers, shadowed closely by their escort fighters, wheeled around at the mission's boundary, returning to their bases. Each encounter, though routine, played out like a chess move in a grand, ongoing strategic game between the East and the West. Russian aircraft flying across Alaska are not the only threats NORAD has had to contend with. The Chinese, like their Russian counterparts, have also led their own incursions into American territory through unconventional means. In early January and February 2023, the American military and population were caught with their guard down after a strange and mysterious-looking object was spotted in American airspace. Although unrecognizable at first, the population spotted a Chinese spy balloon drifting so far into the continental United States that it was unsafe to shoot it down by aircraft without risking injuries to civilians or American infrastructure. The balloon weighed a couple thousand pounds, was over 200 feet tall, and featured a jet airline-type payload. It first entered the U.S. through the Aleutian Islands in Canada before venturing into Idaho. On the morning of February 4th, 2023, the skies off the coast of South Carolina became the stage for a decisive display of American air power. An F-22 Raptor ascended rapidly, tasked with intercepting the Chinese surveillance balloon that had been tracked by civilians and officials alike at 58,000 feet. The surveillance balloon, a topic of intense public and diplomatic discussion, was about to be neutralized. The Raptor's pilot, known by the callsign Hawk, locked onto the balloon with an AIM-9X Sidewinder missile, renowned for its precision and agility. The command was given, and the missile was launched, streaking across the blue sky and striking the balloon with lethal accuracy. The impact was immediate and spectacular, reducing the balloon to debris in a brief, bright explosion that marked a clear end to its unauthorized flight. However, the fallout from this action was just beginning. As pieces of the balloon fell into the ocean, the incident sparked a broader controversy over international surveillance and airspace sovereignty, raising questions about the future of diplomatic relations and military engagements. The debris was quickly collected for intelligence analysis, but the discussions and diplomatic strains it caused continued to ripple across nations. The violation of American airspace and the slow response of the military led to severe criticism of NORAD's effectiveness. Were American skies safe from the enemy? NORAD's commander, Air Force General Glenn D. Van Herk, told the media, quote, "I will tell you that we did not detect those threats, and that's a domain awareness gap that we have to figure out." Nevertheless, he pointed out the balloon did not threaten U.S. citizens. Still, it was not enough to eradicate the criticism regarding NORAD's failure to detect the object in time, with Van Herk stating, quote, "It must be noted that this lack of awareness is not the result of inadequate radar, but due to the settings or gates of the system, which are configured to filter out specific information, such as the detection of smaller objects, instead of enemy aircraft and missiles." Just a few days later, Air Force fighters scrambled to shoot down 3 unidentified airborne objects that ventured over the skies of Canada, Alaska, and Michigan. Unlike the Chinese spy balloon, these objects remain unidentified to this day. All these unusual sightings in American airspace prompted the Defense Department to spend over $90 million to bolster U.S. air defenses against these types of objects. Some of these funds will be destined for sensing and analysis in phenomenology and altitudes similar to those of these flying objects shot down recently. Canada's Prime Minister has recently told the press that, quote, "The balloon incident, I think, was a good wake-up call for all of us, that we needed to do more. It really put a lot of energy behind NORAD modernization, for example. because we saw the limitation of our existing domain awareness assets.